His name is Youcef Nadarkhani. He's an Iranian pastor, and for the last year, he's carried a death sentence. His crime? Renouncing his Muslim faith and becoming a Christian.
Pastor Youcef's case has sparked outrage around the world, and the Iranian government has begun backpedaling. Earlier this month, the state media said his crime is not apostasy, but for rape and extortion, and because he's, quote, a security threat. Then the Supreme Court decided to seek the opinion of the highest authority in Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei.
Well, now the High Court has ordered a retrial, and the state media says it's because of problems with the initial investigation. Joining us now from D.C. is Jordan Sekulow. He's the executive director for the American Center for Law and Justice. Jordan, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Gordon.
Is this a sign that the Iranians are backing down?
Well, there's actually been a little bit of interesting confusion going on. The word retrial, the way it got translated from the Iranian press into our press here, and we did more and more research into this over the last 24 hours. Well, all the Supreme Court has agreed to at this moment is to hear a review of his appeal. If he appeals, they will review it. That doesn't mean that they will have a retrial. I mean, as you know, Gordon, a review can mean we look at it, we say, okay, we agree, we send a piece of paper back, and that's it. So some of that news, and that's one of the biggest issues following this trial, the Iranian court system, it's not like our court systems in the Western world. It's very different. And as was just pointed out, the Ayatollah, and we work with the attorney here in Iran every single day, and the Ayatollah is going to be making the decision as it stands right now on Pastor Youcef's fate. Now, he could say there must be a full new retrial, but at this stage, what was actually reported and confirmed now is that the Supreme Court said, sure, if he appeals the verdict, we'll look at it, we'll review it, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily going to get a whole new trial.
Do you expect any kind of resolution like we saw in the case with the American hikers that were captured on the border with Iraq? That there could be some kind of ransom here? Are we looking at that kind of justice?
You know, I would think because of what has happened recently in the news involving Iran and these terror plots here in Washington, D.C. and in New York with the ambassador, the Israeli embassy, the Saudi embassy, and the Saudi ambassador, that Iran and the Ayatollah specifically, now that we have confirmed this decision's in his hands, and now he's also dealing with this other public relations and international relations disaster, may be an opportunity where we need to really pray hard for Pastor Youcef that he would just step in and handle this matter and try to resolve it, maybe as an act of goodwill to the American people and to so many the international community. And I have to say, Gordon, you know, CBN News has got all of the breaking news on it. We've been working so closely with your news department to make sure that all of your viewers and everybody checking out your website has got all of the latest information, because there's a lot of disinformation out there. As of today, Pastor Youcef is alive. There's no verdict yet from the trial court, and Ayatollah Khamenei has not yet weighed in.
What's the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton? What's her position on this? I know members of Congress have been petitioning her to intervene. Right. What's her stand?
You know, it's interesting. We're up to over 80 members of Congress, and including 15 Democrats. We've been working on gathering this group together. And among that group, Gordon, includes Congressman Keith Ellison, the first Muslim ever elected to Congress and someone who's been fairly controversial. He signed on, which I thought was a sign of how broadly of a human rights issue this was. Secretary of State Clinton and the State Department have been extremely weak. Her most recent statement was that she's concerned about reports involving this pastor. Now, the White House issued a strong statement, but it didn't come from President Obama, and we really do need something from Secretary of State Clinton. You know, she's going to be meeting now with back channels with Iranian officials because of the terror plot in the United States. It would be a great opportunity for Secretary Clinton to step up to the plate and really ask the Iranians to get to handle this pastor situation in the right way. I mean, this is not about politics. It's not about international affairs. It's just about basic human rights. And what we've seen is the news story started here with us at CBN News, and it's spread around the world and brought a lot of people together. And people are really exposed to the persecution of Christians in Iran, and also the fact that in those countries there are a lot of our brothers and sisters that we need to continue to pray for. There's hundreds in jail as we speak today.
Well, I will say there is an international relations issue here. When you look at the UN Charter, all the member states sign on to a Declaration of Human Rights, and one of the human rights they declare to be true is freedom of conscience. that you're able to freely choose what you believe about God. Do you see any hope of that ever getting anywhere? The UN's never taken this issue on. When you look at what Saudi Arabia does, when you look at what Iran does, these other Muslim theocracies, you sort of go, is there any teeth to that kind of thing?
You know, it's interesting. Iran is even a member of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which Article 18 says you have the freedom of choice to choose your religion. No one can force your religion or even inquire into about your religion. So they've signed on to that charter at the United Nations. But we've heard absolutely zero from the UN, Gordon, and we're an NGO at the United Nations. And I think that's because Secretary of State Clinton really needs to go to them. I mean, we've petitioned, we've signed, we've got letters, we've got documents, we've filed at the committees, we've got the members of Congress doing it. But without our top diplomat in the United States, the UN is not going to take a lot of action. That says something about the United Nations. But I'll tell you what, we would not get this decision to the Ayatollah, which I honestly believe, Gordon, is better than the court system because he is not under as much pressure as these judges are from clerics or extremist groups or other, he's got a lot more power to make these kind of decisions without having to risk his own safety. I think there was a real issue here. These judges could have released him twice, and it looked like they were going to, and pulled back. And then now their verdict was basically, we'll let the Ayatollah decide because he's a little bit more immune to the pressures. But yeah, we got to get Secretary of State Clinton on board. I'm proud of these members of Congress, but it's the American people and Christians around the world. It all started at CBN News, who started praying, who started calling their members of Congress, who started sending the news stories out and sending out the interviews. And that's why it got to the Ayatollah, not because of what the State Department's done or President Obama.
Any insight on why Youcef was targeted? Is there a growing Christian community within Iran? Is that the reason behind that? They're just sending a signal to all Muslims, if you convert, we're coming after you?
Sure. You know, after that 2009, the Green Revolution, there's been a crackdown of anyone who's not officially part of the state. So the Baha'i faith community, the Sunni Muslim community, because Iran is majority Shia Muslim, the Jewish community, and anyone else, there's been a crackdown, but specifically targeted evangelical Christians. And why is that, Gordon? It's because evangelical Christians, typically in Iran, come from Muslim backgrounds. Pastor Nadarkhani, for instance, was found by this court actually never to have been officially a practicing Muslim, but he's still an apostate because his parents were. That's why he was given opportunities a couple of weeks ago to renounce his faith 3 times, and he refused to do so, and the execution order stands. So there's an unbelievable amount of growing persecution there, and it comes in waves. We saw it after the 1979 Islamic Revolution, then again through the 1990s. That was the last person officially executed for apostasy, was a Christian pastor, and then since 2009, as we speak, there's about 275 confirmed Christians in prison. Hundreds get arrested and then released each week. What's unique about this case is that usually, and Pastor Nadarkhani's had this happen to him before, they get arrested, he was a few years ago, and they're let go a couple weeks later. But he's got a church growing with over 400 members, and it may be bigger than that. He's young. He's in his mid-30s. His wife was in prison for a year. His Muslim attorney, Gordon, has been sentenced to 9 years in jail. This is the crackdown, all stemming from what happened in 2009, because the regime thinks that anyone who is not a part of their version of Shia Islam is somehow an enemy of the state. You saw those charges that he was a Zionist traitor. That is about the worst thing you can say about someone in Iran. But if that were the case, the Ayatollah wouldn't be having to make the decision on his fate. It's all about Christianity. It's all about apostasy. And we proved it in the court documents to the press. CBN News has it on their website as well. And we just have to really watch. And I think, listen, what we've learned, Gordon, is that if we can find out about these stories before the bad thing has happened, the really bad part, I mean, he's been in jail for 2 years, before the execution, before the person disappears, if we raise our voices, we can get it to the highest leaders of the government of Iran, and they're under a lot of international pressure, and it's the time to start doing that.
Well, Jordan, thank you for being with us, and thanks to the American Center for Law and Justice for being on the forefront of this important case. If you're watching at home, I want you to get involved, and we've got a variety of ways. I want you to start by contacting your local congressman, your local representative. You can call the Capitol Hill switchboard. Here's the number, 202-224-3121. and ask for your congressman and tell them you're a voter and you want them to speak up in favor of Pastor Youcef. If you don't know who your congressman is, go to 700clubinteractive.com and we'll have a link that will direct you to a site where you can find out who he or she is. While there, you can also sign the ACLJ's petition to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. We need to have action on both at the State Department. We need to have congressional action petitioning the State Department for further action. We need to take this to the UN. Iran increasingly seems to be a rogue state, and we need to speak up for the persecuted church around the world. I also encourage you to pray. Prayer has been the thing that has broken this story open and has raised awareness and has brought protection to Pastor Youcef. Continue to pray for his life. It literally is being held in the balance. So pray for him. Pray for the persecuted church around the world.